Item number 7, ordinance amending the San Francisco Administrative Code, Chapter 6, Public Works Contracting Policies and Procedures, subsection 6.22G, to establish a local hiring policy for city public works or improvement projects requiring contractors and their subcontractors to perform certain percentage of project work hours using San Francisco residents and disadvantaged San Franciscan residents.
Colleagues, for the past several months, I've sat down with employers who perform public work, met with unemployed construction workers who live in San Francisco, convened meetings with advocates and community leaders to hear their concerns, met with individual building trade unions, minority and small local contractors, read all the published reports on local hire, looked at what other jurisdictions like Cleveland are doing to promote construction opportunities for their residents, spent time with our city attorney reviewing all the legal cases to support a mandatory program, and worked with the mayor's office and the contracting departments to try and fashion a workable mandatory local hire policy, which is what we have here today. This process, I've said a couple times now, is like threading the eye of a needle. It's very, very complicated, negotiating with many of the stakeholders and hearing between the lines and directly what the people's concerns are. The legislation that we have here is really above anything else, is changing what has traditionally been the policy around construction trade hiring in San Francisco, going from good faith efforts to a mandatory program. We have both the budget analysts report and Ted Egan's from the Office of Economic Impacts reports on the costs they anticipate this legislation will generate. And I want to admit, yes, the legislation before you will cost money. If we want to do the cheapest thing possible, then we do nothing. Then we do nothing at all, and we have to live with the consequences. But I would say what we had to live with recently in terms of high unemployment and the misery and harm that does to our communities is not something that is tolerable here in San Francisco. That there's a real hunger that's out there in San Francisco. There's a real hunger, and it's not a recent hunger, it's a hunger that's been around for decades, of people wanting to have greater access, wanting to have greater opportunities in the construction trades and under industries. This legislation addresses the construction trades. Last night I saw this poster, which to me was really, really inspiring. It says, "Help build San Francisco," and it's encouraging people to find places to apply for work. It has two community members, Pastor Jewel R., who's a carpet, linoleum, and soft tile worker, and Trinetta W., a construction laborer, both of whom are looking for work, both of whom are encouraging others to find work in our public works projects, but also looking at what our hunger here is in the city to find opportunity that is needed. And also recognizing that we are putting San Franciscans to work, we are building new buildings, new subway lines, new sewer system plants, new monuments of our human ingenuity, and it's time that we did the right thing and made our local hire policy a mandatory one. We have many people who are part of the presentation today. In particular, we have Guillermo Rodriguez from the Office of Economic and Workforce Development, who will share the first presentation on this legislation. Mr. Rodriguez, if you want to come forward. We'll also be hearing after Mr. Rodriguez from Mr. Egan from the Office of Economic Impact from the part of the Controller's Office, and then we'll go on to the report from the budget analyst, Mr. Harvey Rose.
Guillermo Rodriguez, Director of CityBuild, Office of Economic and Workforce Development. A lot of what I was planning to address were some of the amendments that we worked with the supervisor on, and I do appreciate that a lot of the challenges associated with looking at all of the different aspects associated with local hire, trying to make the legislation workable on the ground. Our office has to, on a daily basis, work with community groups and contractors throughout the city doing public work, and our colleagues in the awarding and contracting departments. You know, our position has been to try to find a workable solution so that local hire actually works on the ground, and I do congratulate the supervisor for taking many of the amendments that the city offered in all the different contracting departments.
Next up, we have the Controller's Office, and Mr. Egan and Mr. Controller Ben Rosenfield will share with us their report and their comments.
Good afternoon, Supervisors. Ben Rosenfield, Controller's Office. While Mr. Egan is setting up his presentation, I thought I would just very briefly summarize some of the key findings in our economic impact report, which we issued just earlier today. Generally speaking, we find that the legislation here before you today does have positive net benefits to the local economy. That's really the result of two things. It's the result of increased employment and wages in the private sector, partially offset by higher construction costs.
Mr. Egan?
Good afternoon, Supervisors. Ted Egan, Controller's Office of Economic Analysis. I'd like to share with you our economic impact report. Before I go into the detail of our analysis, I'd just like to summarize our key conclusions. This legislation with a 50% target will create construction jobs, about 336 construction jobs for San Francisco workers. That will pump into the city's economy an additional $27 million of spending, which really represents the wages and salaries of those workers who would otherwise be unemployed. So this legislation will be effective at creating jobs for construction workers who are currently unemployed. And that will represent an injection of money into the city's economy that will have a positive economic impact. We believe, for reasons that I'll go into in a few minutes, that this will also increase the city's contracting costs to the tune of about $9 million as the legislation is currently written.
Supervisor Elsbernd?
The $9.3 million, can you give me, help me put that in scope? You're basing this on the annual capital plan, so what would be the total dollar amount?
Of the covered projects, it's about $950 million, so we're roughly talking about a 1% increase of construction costs that's due from this legislation.
Before going to public comment, why don't we hear from the budget analyst? Mr. Rose?
And given the impacts of the city that Mr. Egan has mentioned, the potential impacts, we consider approval of this ordinance to be a policy matter for the Board of Supervisors.
Okay. Thank you, Mr. Rose. Colleagues, we can go on to public comment unless there's questions that we have for any of our city staff. Bob Alvarado.
Executive Officer for the Northern California Carpenters. I think if you're inclined to implement a lot of the changes that we brought forward, I think it's really something. I can only speak for the Carpenters. I think it's something that we can make it work, both for the employers, the unions, and the San Francisco residents. Thank you.
Great, thank you. Thank you for coming in today. Appreciate your time.
My name is Ramon Hernandez. I'm the business manager of the local laborers, Local 261. I represent over 3,000 workers, city and county. Take, if you comment, 20% on the local hires, labor is going to support you, and we're almost there, and I think we're going to do it. Thank you.
Fred Blackwell, Executive Director at the San Francisco Redevelopment Agency. Supervisor Avalos, Supervisor Elsbernd, good to see you. I am here today to speak in support of what you've proposed for a variety of reasons. As the Executive Director of the San Francisco Redevelopment Agency, I hear firsthand every day about how development in the city of San Francisco doesn't necessarily benefit the folks who have lived through years of disinvestment and neglect.
Good afternoon, Supervisors. Ed Harrington, General Manager of the SF Public Utilities Commission. I want to echo Fred's comments without repeating all of them because I think they were very well put. As you know, the PUC has a lot of projects that are going on. We have struggled sometimes less than fully successfully to make good faith into a reality, and the problem has been we have not had a tool with teeth in it. So I want to applaud you for giving us that tool with teeth in it so we can actually make this happen as opposed to hope for it to happen. We are supportive of this. We thank you for your work, and we look forward to working on it once it passes.
Thank you very much.
I just want to share some of my thoughts very quickly on this legislation. I'm an enthusiastic supporter of this legislation. I believe it is a logical next step from the efforts that we embarked on a few years ago in trying to reform how this city compels workforce compliance and really insist upon both within the public sector contracts and private partnerships that there be local hiring and that local hiring is more than just good faith. And just to reiterate my co-sponsorship of the legislation, I co-sponsored the legislation.
Thank you. You know what? It was, the name was taken up, I think, in the memo of the whole. That's why I was asking. Okay. Thank you so much, Supervisor Mirkarimi. I want to, before we discuss moving forward, I just heard from my legislative aide that Cleveland, Ohio, which was provided the legislation that this legislation was modeled after, which was a mandate of 20%, is actually at 31% in terms of meeting their local hiring requirement. They've exceeded by 11%. And I think that as we see the implementation of this policy move forward, if it's implemented, we will see that it'll get easier and easier to hit the target as we're building a robust workforce development program that will accompany the legislation. So without further ado, I want to recommend that we send this to the full board. I would say that we can move it forward, since we're going to be considering possible amendments to it, that we can move it forward without recommendation to the full board. We could take that without objection. It'll go to next Tuesday's full board calendar. Very good.